Good evening, council, members of staff and public. May I have a mover and seconder call the meeting to order, please? I have councillors Fisher and Moore that the special meeting of council of the Township of Springwater of January 15th come to order at 5:21 p.m. All those in favor? And that has carried. Council, are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest this evening? And seeing none, I will now call upon Brian Drennel to provide a presentation regarding the Simcoe Municipalities Insurance Pool.
The final proposal. So I'll kick off the presentation with the first slide. So a bit of background. In response to the insurance premiums being unstable for the last few years, largely due to a hard insurance market, Simcoe County and the participating municipalities explored alternatives to the traditional insurance market placement that's being used right now for the municipalities. We did conduct due diligence to determine the feasibility study, so the feasibility of the proposed approach, and that was completed by actuaries at Axima, and concluded that there was a very strong business case for implementation of an alternative, and now implementation is underway, and the commitment from the municipalities is required to move forward. Next slide. So the proposed solution, after looking at a variety of different insurance alternatives, was an insurance pool. This won't be the first insurance pool in Ontario. There are two existing pools. The Waterloo Region Municipalities Pool, which was established in 1998, and the Durham Municipality Insurance Pool, established in 2000, both of which were put together by the predecessor firm to Axima back then. And you might be wondering why it's taken 25 years to create the next insurance pool. And largely that's because there was a very protracted period of soft insurance market conditions where premiums were steadily going down, essentially from about 2005 all the way to 2017. And then we saw that reversal in 2018 and 2019 as the hard market came in. And that's a pretty typical cycle, insurance cycle, to go hard market and soft market where prices are going down and coming back up again. But that's the longest one, I think, as far as I'm aware, that's ever happened. During that time, both of those existing pools thrived and continued to save money and deliver value to the municipalities in them. Neither of them collapsed, neither of them lost members. So it is definitely a vehicle that works very well. What I will add to that is that it isn't really until the hard market that we get that interest in starting new vehicles such as this. So we're hopeful and excited that Simcoe Municipalities Insurance Pool will start in 2025. Next slide. So why start an insurance pool? Next slide. Largely because insurance is expensive. How expensive, you might ask? The reality is that we looked at the projected premiums for 2025 across the 18 municipalities, including the county. It's expected that approximately $20.6 million will go out to the insurance industry in premiums. And out of that, the expectation is only about 34 cents on the dollar will come back to pay claims for the municipalities. Some years more, some years less, but on average, the expectation is 34 cents on the dollar. So what's happening with the other 66 cents? Profit margin for insurance companies, which are not in the business of charity. So profit margin for sure, one piece. Also their risk margin, because they do buffer for the fact that claims could be substantially worse than expected. And then a big chunk of it, 35%, goes to insurance brokers. Operating costs, just buildings and so on, marketing costs, et cetera, for insurers, as well as premium tax, which is about 4%. So there's a lot of available savings to be had if we can rethink how we do this. Next slide. So here's a great analogy for self-insurance. If you're wondering, what is self-insurance versus insurance? And self-insurance, we like to think, is like making your own meals at home. And insurance is like dining out at restaurants. Fundamentally, the same outcome, just doing it a little bit differently. Next slide. So why do we buy insurance? Just like when we go to restaurants, largely we go for convenience. It's lovely to go out and have everything taken care of. And it's a single annual cost for insurance premiums, just like it's a single cost on the menu. You know exactly what it's going to cost and it's going to deliver to you. So there is an annual cost savings. I'm very clear about annual because who knows what next year will be. Next slide. Often insurers, just like restaurants, can deliver specialty items. And in the insurance world, cyber is one of the ones that comes immediately to mind. It's a unique skill set and provides value, but also very large losses, et cetera. And we'll talk a little bit about why we're going to still use insurance because there are things that risks that we don't want to accept. Next slide. And service. Especially if you're a smaller municipality, insurance provides all the service embedded in your insurance premium. So you get the claims and the risk management and all those services embedded in your cover rather than having to bring on FTEs at your municipality. Next slide. So why should we buy less insurance? Simply put, cost. I would ask you to show by hands how many people eat every meal out at a restaurant. Largely, it's probably because of the cost and the sodium, but that's a side point. Insurance comes at a premium. It just does. So it does cost us extra to get all the service and specialty, etc. Next slide. The other reason why we should buy less insurance is because we should be investing in building out our in-house capabilities. And that's a big part of what we're proposing here as well. As we build out our in-house capabilities, we need less and less of the insurance. Just like learning to make a great plate of spaghetti, you're not going to spend $17 at the restaurant to buy spaghetti if you can do a great job of it at home. Next slide. So how do we go about buying less insurance? First and foremost, we really advocate with building out risk management practices to avoid and reduce losses in the first place. Another way we can buy less insurance is to increase deductibles. But if you're a small municipality and increase your deductibles, that means less stability for your annual costs. And so we're proposing to use pooling to reduce that volatility by sharing that piece of it. And also to use that facility to create those internal central resources around risk management, claims management, so you get the service aspect, so we can do more of it in-house. Next slide. The insurance coverage under the pool will be largely the same or better than what you have now. The big difference is under a pool, it's one large policy for all the participating municipalities instead of, in this case, up to 18 separate policies. But everybody will get the benefit of having the largest available limit. So it should provide improved coverage, but at the very least won't be worse than what you have today. Next slide. So let's look at the pool structure. Municipalities will continue to have individual municipality deductibles just like they do today. And that's important because municipalities should share in the cost of the claims that they bring, but it will be largely the same. And we'll talk in just the next slide about how there will be some subtle differences, but municipalities will continue to pay a deductible like they do on the regular insurance marketplace. But above that, there will be a pool layer up to $500,000 per claim. And that's where that risk sharing element will be. And that creates the stability across the municipalities. And as I mentioned earlier, we're still going to buy insurance. So above $500,000, that any claim will be covered by an excess insurance policy. So we're still going to buy insurance. We're just going to buy less of it by increasing the amount that we retain as a group. If you're wondering how often we're expecting to breach the 500,000, there's about one claim a year that's bigger than 500,000 across all municipalities. So we're not going to use insurance all that often. Next slide. The deductibles are important. The important thing is that all the municipalities use the pool structure the same based on size. So municipalities will be asked to move to deductibles on sort of a consistent basis. And the actuaries have proposed the following stretch. So liability, for example, will have deductibles for smaller municipalities with populations under 25,000 of $25,000. And all the way at the other end of the spectrum, the county, for example, will have a $100,000 deductible. That means that the county will continue to retain much more of their individual costs than a smaller municipality, and we use pools slightly less. And this is all about driving fairness as well as investment in risk management for the large municipalities that have the ability to do so. Next slide. So just to drive home an example of how this will work, if there was a $10 million loss, a significant motor vehicle accident, for example, the first, say, $10,000 of that loss will be borne by the individual municipality. Then the pool will cover the next $490,000. And then above that, the insurance marketplace will continue to cover $9.5 million. They don't happen often, but when they do, we want to have insurance. So it's really about creating stability for the pool. So we're not looking to take on massive, massive losses. We're looking to take on the losses that are predictable and consistent. George.
Pool pays the next 490,000 to 400,000.
Yes.
Is the 400,000 accurate, or should it be 500,000?
In no case is there no deductible. So the pool is going to pay the difference between the municipality deductible and the limit set within the pool. So in the county's context, the pool will provide up to 400,000. They will pay 100, and each municipality will be told what the losses expected are within their deductible. So you'll actually be able to budget for it, which is sort of a unique thing that the pool does. It tells you exactly what to budget for your deductible retention in order to make sure that you budgeted fairly for it. No problem. Next slide. So this is what it looks like today. Right now, the municipalities in Simcoe County retain about $1.8 million of losses under the deductible, and then send out, as I mentioned earlier, about $20.6 million in premiums to the insurance market, never to be seen again. Next slide. And what we're proposing to do is, and there's some small adjustments to deductibles, which have all been offset within the savings presented. The deductibles will expand to just under $2 million expected within the municipal deductibles, because a lot of the deductibles have just eked up just a little bit, $5,000 or $10,000. Then the pool will retain will retain a levy of $8.4 million net of the excess insurance. And I'm showing here the excess insurance will going to continue to go out and procure from the insurance market will be about $7.7 million. And just to make it clear, we're not expecting to change the economics of insurers. We know their target is about 30 to 35% losses. So what we're doing, we're squeezing them down to just 7.7 million instead of 20.6. So it'll be a lot less losses. And then that will cover off all the losses in the same way that they do today, except it will still generate a $4.3 million savings, or 19.2%, although we have proposed a slightly different route in the next coming slides. So if we go to the next slide, the way the municipalities will experience this levy won't be two different invoices. It won't be an excess insurance and a pool levy. It's going to be one levy, all inclusive. And so you could sort of view the pool as just being the new insurer, and they'll provide the levy. Next slide. Inside that levy, if we break it down even further, about $4.5 million of losses are expected to be retained within that $490,000 to $400,000 layer that's being pooled. So the actuaries have determined that expected cost in gray. The $815,000 is the risk margin that the actuaries have proposed that the pool retained on an actuarial basis to make sure that 4 times out of 5, there's more than enough money to pay all the claims that come in. $1.575 million has been earmarked for administration. This means hiring a pool manager, claims staff, risk management staff, claims software, finance and accounting services, etc. And then there's the excess insurance at $7.7 million. And the last piece, which is actually variable, is the $1.5 million. The actuaries have proposed that we start off by investing $1.5 million in surplus as an additional buffer against unexpected claims. And that would only be required during what they're calling the setup phase. And once that setup phase and enough capital is in place, then that can be removed, and that'll come back in a slide or two's time. Next slide. So how are we generating savings? The reality is we're not expecting claims to be any different than they were before pooling. Where all the savings is coming from is largely reducing the amount of for-profit insurance we're purchasing and replacing it with a not-for-profit pool operation. We're consolidating the insurance placement services to reduce insurance brokerage costs. Just to put a fine point on that, there's probably about $3 million in brokerage placement costs in the current system, and we're going to shrink that down to about 10%. Also, additional claim savings might materialize as we go down the road. As we bring in in-house claim staff, the Waterloo pool has in-house adjusters that operate at a significant savings over outsourced adjusters. So there might be additional savings which haven't been captured in this analysis yet to be determined. Next slide. So planning for stability, and this is absolutely critical because we don't want to not have success. What we've proposed is that in lieu of taking the 19.2% savings right up front, we defer 9.2% of that and provide all the municipalities with a 10% savings over their expiring costs. And in doing so, we put the 9.2% savings into an accelerated building up of surplus within the pool to ensure really a belt and suspenders approach to startup. Also provides further waves of savings down the road and smoother year-over-year budgeting by utilizing that to create stability. And then next slide, as a visual, what does this look like? Just to see how it stacks up, pun intended. The actual risk margin as provided by actuaries, $815,000. Then for the startup phase, we're proposing $1.5 million. And then another deferred savings of $2 million. So if you were to circle back, and I'm not asking whoever to do that, but if you circle back, we're essentially collecting and putting aside a full 100% of the expected claims in surplus in the opening couple of years. That is all while still delivering a 10% savings to the municipalities. So no additional funds. It's all coming out of what you're already spending today. Next slide. So what this looks like visually, if we were to all look at it on the same year basis, is that the status quo, you have about that gray bars representative of the $20.6 million. So the municipalities will immediately see a 10% savings over the prior year. 9.2% savings will be deferred, as I mentioned. Then at year 3 or 4, we will no longer need to collect the $1.5 million. The actuaries have determined we'll already be at the maturity phase by year 3. So we're going to expand savings to a further 6.7% over status quo. And then at some point, year 6 or beyond, we're going to achieve the full savings of 19.2% plus the 9.2% deferred savings for a total, as compared with status quo, savings of 25.9%. Next slide. So some operational considerations. The planned launch date is June 1st, 2025. I will point out that no municipality currently has a June 1st renewal date, so it's equally inconvenient for everybody. But that date has been selected because it streamlines administration, which means that you'll know what your budget for insurance is for the upcoming year and probably the year after that, well in advance of having to set budgets for January. It also leverages the fact that most insurers renew their reinsurance contracts for Jan 1, which means that we don't have to deal with delays while insurers get their houses in order for the new year. Current policies do allow for cancellation mid-term, some of them with some minor penalties, a short rate adjustment, most of them at pro rata. So it's possible to join without significant penalty, and the savings will override any potential penalties. Joining requires signing into the subscribers agreement, which draft has been circulated for the municipalities to consider. It lays out a 5-year commitment for the initial period. That 5-year commitment is absolutely critical to making sure that we have, first of all, the ability to see the full savings as we roll out in time, so municipalities can get the benefits of what we've proposed here, but it also gives us the negotiating power with the insurers to place that excess policy, because no insurer is going to want to be locked out of providing the insurance for this kind of pool with this level of commitment. The advisory board will be created to run the pool. The advisory board will be made up of 1 seat per municipality, and each municipality, regardless of size, will have 1 vote. So the same level of vote for Simcoe County as for Springwater. Advisory board will be responsible annually for setting the levies. We've proposed a first 3-year structure for rating as we build up our own data set. And the advisory board will also be responsible for the pool operations and staff. The pool manager, for example, will be hired in and will be responsible for the day-to-day operations. This agreement also lays out the entry and exit conditions. Next slide. Not all municipalities are required for launch. This is a question we often get. Do we need everybody? We absolutely don't need everyone. I think we're already at a state where we're confident we're past the 50% mark. The economics still work at 50%. They work at better at 75, and they will work even better at 100%. Entry after startup could add costs. It becomes complicated to bring somebody in after the fact, essentially have to run a separate set of subscriber agreements for somebody who joined later. And those additional costs would be borne by anybody who joins later. So joining at inception is preferable. The other thing is, as we pointed out, surplus is going to be accumulated very quickly within the municipalities who are participating in the pool. And if you want to join later, you have to come in and build up your surplus even faster. So it's going to feel like an overhead cost to join the pool later. Members may also, down the road, not meet the criteria for joining, which will be laid out by the advisory board after formation. And the reality is, as we heard from the Waterloo pool who presented at county, they are not interested in admitting new members. It's working very, very well for them, and they have no particular desire or need to admit new members despite being approached. Last piece before I finish the presentation, I wanted to point out that the pool staff who will be hired in will provide all the services that you've come to expect and more from your insurer. We're not downloading any responsibilities, new responsibilities on municipal staff. Quite the opposite. We'll be providing through the pool risk management services, claims handling services that are dedicated to the municipalities in Simcoe County, including hiring local adjusters, lawyers, etc., that know the area and know the business of municipalities. They'll also be responsible for organizing the meetings and materials and coordinating inspections. So all the things you come to expect from an insurer, that full service approach will be supplied by the pool. The one thing I will say that is new is that each municipality has to appoint somebody to sit on the advisory board and an alternate. But if it's anything like the Waterloo pool, it's just 2 meetings a year. It's not a heavy lift. And that's the end of the presentation.
Well, thank you very much for that, Mr. Darrell. I will have council now, will receive this, and then we can open it up for comments and questions, and then we have a separate resolution to follow. So mover and seconder to receive, please. I have Councillor Fisher and Councillor Moore. That the presentation from Eczema regarding Simcoe Municipalities Insurance Pool be received. And at this time, I can open it up for comments or questions. Deputy Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin, and through you. I was at the presentation at county, and I was very interested in what was going on. Saw a presentation at a conference a number of years ago and came back with that too. But just out of curiosity, I think one of the things that came up there was a suggestion that insurance companies know that this is starting to happen now, and that in the past there's been examples where they've come in with a discounted insurance rate to try and, sway, I guess, municipalities not to join the pool. Have you been experiencing that yet? Because ours is coming up, so I'm just kind of wondering if we're going to experience that, and if we are, that we're ready for it, I guess is what I'm saying, because it'll just be a bit of a dodge. It won't be the real thing.
Well, fair enough. I think I'm fairly surprised the renewals that we've heard about thus far at the January 1st date have, broadly speaking, been in the sort of 1 to 5% range. So probably better than they might have been without the pool, but certainly not not significant reductions. But we have typically seen that in other marketplaces, but it is actually still a harder insurance market. And the insurers are more technical about how they price. And therefore brokers are having a tougher time convincing insurance markets to do essentially loss leading pricing that they used to be in the past. So some reduction, but not earth-shattering changes. And I think a lot of the markets know that it's happening one way or another. So
Owen?
Having said that, I'm just picturing my mind based on the first few slides about the potential savings, but even a 1.5% decrease going into this year's policy would not really provide us any kind of an advantage of not joining the pool.
not really, no,
Thank you.
especially when we get out.
It's a lot of head nods out there. That's great. Anything further from any other members of council? Councillor Fisher?
Question. I think you mentioned after year 3, the savings actually increase. It's built in. I think it was in one of the slides. Is that correct? What would we experience in the first 3 years? I'm sorry, I was sure it's in the slides, but it went quickly. In year 3, what would we be projected to save?
The additional savings is, think, going by memory, 6.7 or 6.2%. So every year, it's not like it's a 1 year 10% savings. Your price will just go down by 10%, and then it will flow essentially with the inflationary effects of claims. And of course, the insurance marketplace is still participating. So we might have some, although much less, impact from the regular insurance marketplace. But then by year 3, it will expand to 16.7% savings over traditional insurance pricing. And then by year 5 or 6, that'll expand to 25.6% savings. Just by way of like a concrete example, the other insurance pools and most self-insurance vehicles, including reciprocal insurance exchanges, can operate at a loss ratio, which is to say the ratio of claims to premiums that insurers just never would, because it's not feasible within their cost structure with all the marketing costs and overhead and so on that regular insurers have. So that's predominantly where we're able to achieve these savings, is by moving to a not-for-profit structure.
Thank you very much for the presentation. There was a lot less train analogies this time than there was the last time that we've sat through it. It's been a couple times, but I'm very excited for Springwater to get on this train. I think that this is a long time coming. Thank you, GM Wilcox, and to our previous CAO for making this possible. I think this is a great initiative that is going to benefit many people, and especially our residents. I mean, why spend money on something you don't have to? So thank you for coming up with this
Thank you.
in-house solution that is going to provide a massive benefit to all of us. So council, we do have 2 resolutions. The first one is just to accept this, and then we can move on to the second one. So if there's nothing further, we can simply accept this and move on to our second resolution. So all those in favor of accepting, and that has carried. And a mover and seconder for our second resolution, which is the action report. And I'll read it out before I ask for a mover and seconder. That the report from the interim deputy chief administrative officer regarding the municipal insurance pool startup dated January 15th be received, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to sign the form of subscription in the municipalities of Simcoe subscribers agreement substantially in the form of attached, and that the director of finance or appropriate designate assigned by the Director of Finance be authorized to represent the Township of Springwater in the Municipal Insurance Pool Advisory Board. So this is agreeing to join the board, and that our Director of Finance would be sitting on the board. Mover and seconder, I have Councillor Alexander and Councillor Garwood. Anything further on this, council? All those in favor? And that has carried. Thank you very much for the presentation, and thank you, council. Out of curiosity, before I continue, how many other local municipalities have joined on at this point? If you're number 4, so we weren't number 1? That's all right. That's all right. We're happy with that. Thank you very much.
Another point, anybody not signed on that you made a presentation to? Okay, thanks.
It's the pink jacket. Perfect. I'll look into getting one of those. Thank you. Thanks very much for being here. We have a mover and seconder for the confirmation bylaw, please. I have Deputy Cabral and Councillor Thompson that bylaw 2025-003 be to confirm and adopt the proceedings of council, the special meeting held on January 15th, 2025, listed here, and be signed and sealed by the mayor and clerk. All those in favor? That has carried. And motion to adjourn, mover and seconder, please. Counselors Garwood and Fisher. That the special meeting of the Township of Springwater does now adjourn at 5:51 PM to meet again on regular meeting on January 15th at 2025 at 6:30 PM. All those in favor? And that has carried.